When you think of the best and the brightest, who comes to mind? An Italian painter? A black man in prison? A notorious rapper? In a celebrated hip-hop song by one of the most rhetorically accomplished East Coast artists, the late Christopher Wallace implicates schools and specifically teachers for failing black youth. Better known as Biggie Smalls, he raps, "To all the teachers who told me I'd never amount to nothing." Biggie was a high school dropout. He started selling drugs at age 12. His arrest record is long and reflects that of life on the streets. Probably one of the last places one imagines the notorious B.I.G. is in school, making the dean's list, graduating, class valedictorian. Black and Latino youth are not generally those we imagine as graduating at the top of their class, and this bias is not unfounded. In reality, these youth have startlingly lower levels of educational achievements than their white and Asian counterparts. In 2021, 87% of white boys graduated from high school, as compared to 76% of black and 78% of Latinos. It's not that black and Latino boys are not intelligent. It's that they are dropping out of high school at rates higher than the national average. Of those expelled from school each year, 40% are black, even though they comprise about 13% of the population. Black students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended than white students, and black and Latino boys are twice as likely not to complete high school. So where are these displaced youth if not in school? One scenario is, well, likely in prison, and that's exactly right. 70% of juvenile arrests are black or Latino. Before the age of 20, 8% of black males will be in prison, as compared to 2.8% of Latino and 0.0% of white. These numbers more than double by the age of 25. In my own city of Chicago, we complain about violence on the streets and wish for safer communities. Perhaps our efforts are misplaced, however. Instead of putting our energies into reducing violence through increased policing and incarceration, our efforts would be much better spent ensuring that these youth, most susceptible to that violence, were made to feel that they belonged emotionally, relationally, psychologically, in school. That's the work, and it begins with teachers. Biggie's rap line begs the question, why did teachers tell him he would never amount to anything? I've been a college professor for over 20 years, and about half of that time has been spent teaching in prison. I work almost exclusively with men, which is why my talk focuses on males. Over the years, I've heard numerous stories of students, most of whom are black and Latino, tell me of teachers thinking that they're dumb, or questioning the ways that they think, or being surprised when they score well on a test. One, who got almost 100% on a standardized exam, was accused of cheating. Such experiences reflect the biases in a white-centered culture, a culture which continues to dominate our educational institutions. Biases are beliefs that we hold about people and groups that cause us to treat some unfairly. Otherwise known as stereotype threat, biases are difficult to recognize because they operate at the unconscious level, which is also what makes them so powerful. I had a student tell me about being at the receiving end of stereotype threat, a story that he and the others in this talk gave me explicit permission to share. Amagon was born in Mexico and emigrated to the US at a young age. His family spoke exclusively Spanish in the household, and so naturally, he was most comfortable in his mother tongue when he entered public school. In first grade, his teacher became displeased with what she perceived as Amagon's lack of engagement. "Speak up," she would say to him over and over again. Finally, one day, the frustrated child responded in English, 2 words that I'm not allowed to say in a TED Talk, but they begin with an F and they end with a U. Amagon is extremely intelligent. He simply didn't have the English-speaking skills that his classmates possessed, and this became an excuse for his teacher to undermine his sense of belonging. Rather than celebrating this bilingual child that she had in her classroom, she took a shortcut and assumed that he was disengaged. Like so many students working to learn a second language, Amagon was the victim of stereotype threat. Many of my Black students relay similar experiences of being told to speak, quote unquote, proper English in school. These experiences reinforce the idea that some belong and others do not. Sadly, neither Amagon's nor Biggie's story is unique. In her autobiography, Black activist Assata Shakur describes junior high as, quote, all the Black kids being in the remedial, or what we call dumb classes. It never ceased to amaze me, she continues, that the kids who were so smart on the streets were always so dumb in school, end of quote. The history of educational access for Black and Latino students is familiar, and the reasons are unsurprising. They were not made to feel welcome in school. And this is a trend that we teachers have the power to reverse. Despite years of trauma, regular exposure to violence, being treated as less than human by society, and not least being separated from family and loved ones, my incarcerated students are among the strongest I have taught. They put in the most effort, earn the highest grades, and in academic language, their critical thinking, cognitive load, and transfer skills are off the charts. That said, I've noticed a consistent trend. Invariably, anxiety sets in. Assignments start coming in late, enthusiasm wanes, and the learning community loses some of its cohesiveness. Even the strongest students find it difficult to sustain the energy to progress. In talking with my students, I learned two things. First, most, if not all, had experienced significant trauma in their educational histories, and they didn't feel safe in school. Second, they were experiencing a disconnect between what they knew from the streets and what they were experiencing in the classroom. In short, the biases underlying the curricula and approaches to traditional college teaching played a prohibitive role in the students' sense of belonging, and therefore their desire to bring themselves fully to their work. Reflecting on my own training, I finished my doctoral work an expert in my field, but I didn't learn how to teach, how to connect a set of activities with learning outcomes, how to elicit my students' stories and adapt the course content in response to the experiences in the room. Studies all show that passive learning through lectures is one of the least effective ways for students to deepen and grow intellectually. And yet we educators arguably spend the majority of our time developing course content. When I think of my students and look at what I've done in the classroom, I start to wonder, what if how we teach is as important as what we teach? Or centering our students' stories and their voices and their agencies is critical to deepening their knowledge? Or that learning our students is the most important skill a teacher can possess? How would that change what we do in higher education? What I've learned from my students who have experienced so much trauma is that these practices are game changers for teachers and learners. Not only is course content not compromised, but students develop a sense of empathy, and it raises their visibility, all factors contributing to the sense that these men belong in school. When I began to shift my classroom approaches to become more invitational, three things happened. First, my students began to connect their stories with the course material in meaningful ways. Second, the learning community became more supportive of each other. And third, my own ideas around who is the best and the brightest expanded. The stories of four men underscore the power of story and agency and voice in healing from educational trauma and promoting a sense of academic self. At one point, all of these men were my students. Now, we are all coworkers. 3 of them I currently work in prison with as they are still incarcerated. The first, Mike, began his own studies, a quiet student. Mike rarely, if ever, spoke in class, and I thought he was just there to earn good time. 8 years later, Mike has achieved a master's degree. He was the speaker at his opening convocation and is now a revered professor in a bachelor's degree program in another prison facility. Mike attributes his success to an educational experience which not only gave him course content, he was able to process his story and his life experiences in a way that he found healing. Mike is now a trauma-informed teacher who has the utmost respect of the men that he leads and serves in prison. Like Mike, Alex is a professor in a bachelor's degree program. In all my years of teaching, I have never experienced such facility connecting the course material with life on the streets, artistic expression with cultural nuance. Alex's responsiveness to his students and the way that he's an exemplar, especially for those for whom English is a second language, is a result of Alex embracing his identity as a teacher and developing the confidence to use his voice in school. When I was workshopping this TEDx talk with my incarcerated colleagues, the third, Devon, looked at me and said, "Michelle, why aren't I giving this talk?" He didn't want me to take it the wrong way, but Devon was posing a critical challenge to me, a white educator, not system impacted, speaking to the experiences of Black and brown men. His question demonstrated his own confidence in his life experiences to critique an authority figure, and his point is well taken. The fact is that so many men much better positioned to give this talk than I are locked up. The fourth, Tony, is yet another professor. Tony was incarcerated for 20 years. He's been released for 3. Immediately when he got out, he secured a job as the assistant writing director at his alma mater, and he is an adjunct professor at 2 universities. Tony teaches incarcerated students, and his very presence, along with the way of his holistic life success after getting out, is a reminder to the mostly Black and Latino men that he serves that they belong at all levels of the academy. Biggie was not wrong to point the finger at all the teachers who told him he would not amount to anything. As a nation, we have disinvested in education, making it difficult for so many, despite the data indicating a close link between higher levels of educational achievement, upward economic mobility, and reduced violence. Too many people of color, especially Black young men, have internalized the narrative that they don't belong in school, a narrative infecting the school-to-prison pipeline, and we are all losers for it. I work at a school who believes that teachers matter, students belong, and as a society, we lock up some of our best and brightest. My school's mission is to provide quality education to under-resourced communities. It's why we do higher ed in prison. But it can't stop there. The things that we can learn from our incarcerated students and the ways that they can use their knowledge to change the world beyond the prison walls. It's incredible. Imagine if Biggie had sat under the tutelage of Professor Tony, or been exposed to the trauma-informed classroom of Professor Mike, or had his artistic talents affirmed by Professor Alex, and shared a social critique with Professor Devon. Arguably, Biggie achieved relative success without a high school degree. But he was also dead by the age of 24. Where would we be had Biggie and all the other best and brightest that we lock up had been made to feel welcome and safe in school? I'd like to think they'd be alive and free, and we would all be winners for it.